So in this video we are going to look at modifying messages. Now, as part of Node-RED fundamentals we already had a modifying messages topic, and that was very much focused on the change node. So the idea of the change node was you have a value coming in, you modify the value with the change node. So you can set message.payload, you could set flow global, you can set it to particular variables based on the incoming messages, and we did also show how you can use a JSONata expression to get a bit of customization in there, like rounding numbers and stuff like that. What we're going to focus on today is a kind of modifying messages part 2, and it's not going to use the change node. It's actually going to use the template node, and this is the core template node. So inside the function group of nodes on the left hand side we have a template. Now, what a template allows you to do is to set a particular property on your message, flow or global, and I'll cover each of those options shortly. But to start with, we'll focus on a message payload, and then here it's complete free text that you can type whatever you like, and anytime you want to inject something that's dynamic based on input coming into the template node, you use what's called the mustache syntax. So it's two curly braces, the value that you want to render, and then two curly braces again to close that out. So for example, this is the payload, is the default that comes with a template. So if we just wire an inject and a debug in there, we can see what that looks like by clicking inject. This is the payload. The whole payload is then rendered out into here, and you'll notice that I didn't need to put message dot. It by default just assumes you're referencing message dot, but it is possible to get access to variables outside of that scope. So for example, right now I have a payload left over from earlier when I was doing rehearsals, so bear with me, but we don't have anything in our flow or global context, right? So we're going to use an inject node up here just to set something in our flow context. So we're going to have flow, let's just call it example, and we'll call this hello world. And just to get that set, we can deploy and then run that. And then now when I check my flow, I have flow example hello world. So in my template node, if I want to access flow variables or global variables here, all I have to do, actually, I'll put message payload in, and this is the flow variable, and it's open close brackets, and it will auto complete the close brackets for you. Flow.example is how we then get access to stuff that's in my flow variables. So if I now switch back to my debug panel and run this, notice that it's also included line breaks and that kind of stuff automatically. It will just take explicitly whatever I put in here and render that as output, which can be very, very useful for formatting things that I'll demonstrate shortly. So we have, this is the payload, this is the flow variable. That's good. So we have flow.example, global.example. If I had a global.example would also work here. And the last one I'm going to show you is we've actually still got our environment variables left over from earlier. So we have a course environment variable, and we're just going to type, we are running the course, let's do env dot course done, and deploy. And again, if I inject that now, we now have 3 lines. Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Let's just try that again. Why hasn't that worked? Because I've mistyped env, and there we go. Try that again. There we go. We are running the Node-RED advanced course. So to get access to anything that's coming on your message coming in, it's just directly the property that you want to access. Then flow and global is flow or global dot the property that you want to get access to, and we are running the environment variable dot course env dot, and then that will read from any environment variables that you have set up. I'm running within FlowFuse, so my environment variables are just set up through the panel that I have available to me at the bottom. It is also possible to add some level of logic to your template as well. So we're going to quickly copy this one out. So we've got the simple examples above, and we're going to copy our inject node But instead of injecting a timestamp, we're going to actually inject a JSON object, and we're going to have square brackets, which is going to allow us to do an array. So if I do apples, bananas, and pears, just to show you a quick demonstration here. And actually, we'll leave it at that for now, and I'll show you a nested option in a moment as well, because it's more likely you'll be working from nested data. So here we have a list coming in, an array coming in into our template. Then in our template, if I just rendered payload, just to show you what this is going to look like, what it will instead say is apples, bananas, pears as a piece of text, which is fine. But let's say I want to render so HTML, right? So let's do a HTML example here. So we're going to have some HTML that's going to be an unordered list, and we want an element rendered for every item in that payload. And the syntax for that is you put a hashtag before it, and you open and close the curly braces behind, and then a little further down, rather than the hashtag, you put a slash. And then anything inside here will render for each of the items in your payload list. So if I just for now do a hard-coded thing called list item, and we want a list element for each of these things as well, which in HTML is that, or a list item I should say. So if we render here, we now have a list item called list item, list item, list item, list item, list item. If we want to inject the actual name of the fruit here, what we are injecting in advance is just plain text. And the Moustache syntax, and for what it's worth, you can read more about this. If you go into the help documentation and click on the template node, there is a link here. By default, this uses the Moustache format. If you open that up into a new tab, in this documentation, which is very extensive, you will be able to read this in more detail as well, if you do want to dive into this. But I'm just going to quickly show you some examples anyway. So we've got it list item being rendered out here. Let's say that we just instead want to render the value. We put in some curly braces and we just put in a dot. And just putting a dot will replace the dot with the value instead. So we now have apples, bananas, and pears. If instead of a static string being injected in here, let's instead say that we had a JSON object, which was called, let's do name. And remember to put some quotation marks around this. So we have apples, bananas, pears. We've now nested inside a name object. So rather than rendering dot, which I'll show you first anyway, because that will just render out an object. It doesn't know how to reference the things inside it. We can just put name here. So it will automatically go, okay, I'm looping over payload. I'm going to look for a property called name in each of those objects. So if we now render that out, it will render apples, pears, apples, bananas, pears. Similarly, if payload itself was not the list, but the list was nested inside payload, it would be dot my list or whatever the property was within inside your message payload coming in, and that will allow you to loop. So that is our loops example. So I'm going to quickly label that accordingly. And we're going to copy this logic down here actually. And we are going to use our if-else example. So in this case, we're not necessarily looking for looping over content. We want to use logic to decide whether certain parts of our template will render at all. So what we're actually going to do here is I'm just going to set up some kind of simple HTML, which is going to have two divs. And we're going to have this is div 1. And this is div 2. So if I render that now, we will have both of them come out. So if I click this, This is div1, this is div2. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to change this to a Boolean, which is going to be true. We're going to then have another Boolean, which is going to be false. And then the syntax for being able to do conditional rendering is exactly the same. So it's 2 curly braces, hashtag the value that you're looking to do the conditional logic on. And then here we just have a slash payload, and that will allow us to then render, if that's true, then render div1. And we're always in this case going to render div2. So again, if I clear this out, so if true, it renders everything. If false, it just renders div2. And you'll notice actually even that line break is involved in there as well. So I could clear that out. I could even put the line break inside the if logic. It will take quite literally every character. So it includes a line break there. Here, it no longer includes that line break. So that's a quick demonstration of how to take content and render your variables within a template, how we can do loops within a template based on our content, and also how we can do if-else type logic within a template as well. And what is a practical use case of this? Well, I'm going to use some nodes that I've not yet covered in this course, which is going to be a HTTP in and a HTTP response. And what that will allow us to do is quickly expose a demo. So we're going to go template demo. It will expose a URL that makes that I could navigate to. It will go and get whatever content is set to message payload inside here and return it to the person viewing that particular page. So just to demonstrate this to you, I think we probably still have example here. So we're going to set message payload to flow.example and deploy, so that now if I navigate to the instance that I have running, which is running at there, and I put slash template demo on the end of it, we then get our hello world. So instead of hello world, what I'm going to do is use a template here to be able to render that content out. And so what I want to be able to do is, rather than render a value into message payload, I'm actually going to put it into here, so flow.context, and we might have some other process that's running that means that this data is produced. Or actually we could even use some kind of information from the URL, or we could have this then fires a query to a database, which then populates a particular template. But our message payload is going to be set to flow.content, which I think is what I used. Sorry, it was meant to be content. So now when I inject this, we now have a flow, which is a unordered list with list items. And if I then go to template demo and I refresh my other page, which I've just closed off, so slash template demo, I now have an unordered list that is rendered. And notice how that HTML is also parsed. It is a bullet pointed list. So yeah, that's a way of being able to use the template node to generate some HTML in this case. Other use cases, which we will cover a little later on, is where you can use it to build queries and stuff like that. If, for example, you had a value coming in that defined which table you want to collect data from, you could build an SQL query inside your template node and then pass that on as well. So there's lots of different use cases. You're not really limited in that regard. But that is the kind of foundations that I wanted to show of how to use the template node to build a lot more customization into your kind of modifying of messages.